They were the voices that moved millions, and the rivals that divided nations. 1. A volcanic force of drama and fire, Maria Callas. The other, a velvet river of pure sound, Renata Tebaldi. In the golden age of opera, fans didn't just pick a favorite soprano. They chose sides in a war. This is not just a story of music. It's a battle of egos, empires, and two women who redefined what it meant to be a diva. Welcome to Opera Brownn. Today, we step into the fiercest feud in operatic history, and discover why the world still can't stop talking about Callas versus Tebaldi.
In opera, you have stars, and then you have legends. But every so often, two stars burn so brightly at the same time that they threaten to blot out the sun, creating a drama that's bigger than any stage. In the middle of the 20th century, those two stars were Maria Callas and Renata Tebaldi. One was the Tigress, a fiery revolutionary artist who would sacrifice a beautiful note for a moment of raw, shocking drama. The other was the Angel, the woman said to have the most beautiful voice in the world, a sound of pure Italian velvet. Their rivalry became the stuff of legend, a feud so bitter it defined an entire era of opera and held the world captive. But what if the greatest opera feud of all time wasn't exactly real? What if it was a story cooked up by the press and fueled by their obsessive fans? Today, we're going to unravel the true story of Callas versus Tebaldi. To get the rivalry, you first have to get the women. And they were, in almost every way, total opposites. Renata Tebaldi was born in Pesaro, Italy, the same hometown as the composer Rossini, though she grew up in Langhirano. After a childhood bout with polio, she poured her life into music. The great conductor Arturo Toscanini heard her and famously called hers La Voce d'Angelo, or the voice of an angel. Tebaldi was the carrier of a grand Italian tradition. Her voice was just impossibly beautiful, and she was seen as the picture of grace, a beloved national treasure. And then there was Maria Callas. Born in New York to Greek immigrant parents, Callas was an outsider from day one. Her voice was different. It wasn't always beautiful in the way Tebaldi's was. It could be dark, even a little sharp. But Callas had something else entirely, a terrifying genius for drama. She didn't just sing a part, she became the character, transforming herself with an intensity that completely redefined what opera could be. Where Tebaldi's art was about the beauty of the sound, Callas's was about the power of the story. The opera world had never seen anything like her, and it was both thrilled and a little afraid. In post-war Italy, there was plenty of room for two new stars. Callas and Tebaldi mostly sang different things anyway. Tebaldi owned the soaring music of Verdi and Puccini, while Callas was busy reviving forgotten, brutally difficult bel canto operas. In the early days, they were said to be friendly, but they were both ambitious, and the press was just waiting to light a match. The first real spark reportedly flew in 1951 during a tour in Rio de Janeiro. The story goes that the two sopranos agreed not to sing any encores, but the crowd adored Tebaldi, and she gave them two. Callas was the battle lines were being drawn. Back in Italy, the press had a field day. The rivalry wasn't just professional anymore, it was getting personal. And then came the quote that went around the world. A journalist from Time magazine asked Callas to compare her voice to Tebaldi's. She supposedly shot back that it was like comparing champagne with Coca-Cola. Now, witnesses have since claimed Callas actually said cognac, and that it was someone else in the room who muttered Coca-Cola. But the more sensational version is the one that stuck. Not missing a beat, Tebaldi later offered her own famous jab. "I have one thing Callas doesn't have, a heart." This war of words was a gift to the media and the record companies. It turned two brilliant artists into characters in a soap opera, selling tickets and newspapers. It's a pretty powerful example of how a story can be manufactured. If you think these kinds of hidden histories are as fascinating as I do, take a second to subscribe so you don't miss our next story. By the mid-1950s, the feud was at its peak. Callas and Tebaldi were the two biggest names in opera, and their careers started to collide at the world's most famous venues, La Scala in Milan and the Metropolitan Opera in New York. La Scala, the historic heart of Italian opera, became Callas's territory. Tebaldi, once the reigning queen there, found herself on the outside and made a new home for herself at the Met in New York. Audiences there absolutely worshipped her. The Met's general manager, Rudolph Bing, famously called the sweet-looking but formidable Tebaldi a woman with dimples of iron. So when Callas finally made her own Met debut in 1956, she was walking right onto Tebaldi's turf. The New York press, primed for a fight, constantly pitted their performances against each other. Their fans, the Tebaldiani and the Callasites, turned into warring tribes. In Milan, Tebaldi's fans allegedly threw radishes at Callas on stage. The rivalry wasn't just in the papers. You could feel it in the air of the opera houses themselves. Their competing record labels, Decca for Tebaldi and EMI for Callas, cashed in big time. They would release recordings of the same operas, sometimes just months apart, basically forcing audiences to pick a side. Were you Team Tebaldi, with her absolutely sublime sound, or Team Callas, with her revolutionary drama? All the headlines and publicity came at a price. Callas was always cast as the villain, the difficult, hot-tempered tigress, and it left her isolated and misunderstood. She was a fierce perfectionist in a world that wasn't always ready for her. The press followed her dramatic weight loss, her public affair with Aristotle Onassis, and her tragic vocal decline with cruel fascination. Tebaldi, on the other hand, maintained this image of perfect calm, but she was under a different kind of pressure, next to what Callas was doing. The death of her mother in 1957 was a devastating personal blow, and she struggled to recover from it. But beneath the public drama, there were private moments of respect. Once, when Tebaldi was learning a new role, a staffer at the Met, trying to be careful, recommended she listen to another singer's recording. A few days later, he walked in on Tebaldi listening intently to the Callas version. She looked up at him and asked, "Why didn't you tell me Maria's was the best?" Callas, for her part, was once heard to say in an interview, "I admire Tebaldi's tone, it's beautiful. Sometimes I actually wish I had her voice." After nearly 2 decades of being positioned as bitter enemies, the climax of the feud wasn't a fight, but an act of peace. By the late 1960s, Callas's career had faded, her voice just a shadow of what it had been. Tebaldi was still a reigning star. In 1968, Callas, who hadn't been on a New York stage in years, went to the Met to see Tebaldi perform. After the final curtain fell to thunderous applause, Callas made her way backstage. Imagine the tension in that room. These two women, set up as mortal enemies for their entire careers, stood face to face. And then they embraced. Photos from that night show two colleagues, two survivors of the brutal opera world, sharing a moment of quiet understanding. It was a human ending to a very public war. Years earlier, when the rivalry was at its height, Tebaldi made a quiet but powerful statement. "I sing only for artistic reasons," she said. "It is not my custom to sing against anybody." So, was the feud real? Yes and no. Of course, there was professional jealousy. There was a clash of two massive talents with even bigger egos. Words were exchanged, and feelings were hurt. But the epic to-the-death war the world read about, that was mostly a story. spun by the press and the record companies who knew a good drama when they saw one. In her later years, Tebaldi herself admitted the rivalry was probably good for both of them, because it created a frenzy around opera that helped everyone. It made people listen more critically and think about what they truly valued in a singer: pure, beautiful sound or profound, dramatic truth. Today, Callas is remembered as one of the most influential artists of the 20th century, a true icon. Tebaldi, while still adored by opera lovers, isn't quite the same household name. But asking who was better completely misses the point. It is, as Callas might have said, like comparing champagne and cognac. They were different, each offering a unique and irreplaceable gift to music. Their rivalry, real or imagined, didn't tear their art down. It lifted it up, creating a golden age of opera that we can still hear today.
And so ends a chapter not just of rivalry, but of two women whose very presence transformed the stage, and whose voices shaped the soul of opera itself. Maria Callas, raw, unfiltered, burning with tragic brilliance. Renata Tebaldi, serene, golden, the sound of heaven in human form. They never shared a stage, yet the world watched them as if they did. And in that silent duel, opera found its fiercest devotion. And its greatest myth. Their fans became armies. Their names, symbols. But time, the final arbiter, has softened the lines. Today, we don't have to choose between them. We honor them both, for what they gave, and what they dared to be. Dizzy: two divas, two destinies, one unforgettable legacy. Right finger if this story moved you, don't stop here. Explore more iconic rivalries, triumphs, and tragedies in opera history in our Soprano Legends playlist, linked below. Subscribe to Opera Brownn for cinematic stories that bring music to life. Because opera isn't just art, it's war, it's love, it's legend. Face mask and the stage never forgets.